Thank you, you guys. It was awesome. So Peter again, still a grateful recovering alcoholic. It's June, the 6th month. And so we're going to look a little bit at the 6th step. We were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. If I was to ask any one of you to just quickly tell me what the 12 steps are, many of you would likely, if you missed a step, you would likely miss the 6th step. It's one that's kind of seems a bit insignificant, but it's one that's really important on our journey to healing, I believe. After we've gone through the painful and perhaps traumatic experience of doing our step 4 and then our step 5, admitting all of our defects of character, admitting all of our frailties to God and to another human being, then we're supposed to go into step 6 and discover our shortcomings and our defects of character. And I believe there's a number of reasons why we might just forget this step. First, it's hard for anyone, let alone just addicts and alcoholics, to admit their faults. Nobody likes to admit that they're wrong. Nobody likes to admit that they have faults. Second, when we really get honest with ourselves, there's likely some defects of characters that we don't really want to let go of. And some of them make us quite comfortable and we like to keep them. Third is because some defects of character have become so much a part of us and so much ingrained in our society that we don't even recognize them as defects of character anymore. Why is it so important to admit our defects? Some argue that step 6, like step 4 and step 5, is a bit shaming. But if we don't know what parts we need to work on, how are we ever going to improve? How do we become better people in society? So just a quick show of hands. Is there anybody here that doesn't want to be better, doesn't want to improve? Anybody that doesn't want to? Okay. Does everybody want to improve themselves? Let's do it that way. Yes. All right. So it's always been said that a humble man makes room for progress. The proud man believes that he's already there. We need to keep our pride. We need to keep our pride and our ego in check. We talk about that a lot around here. Step 6 is actually, for me personally, my favorite step. That's because I want to be a better person today than I was yesterday. I often fall short of that mark and realize that when I do my step 10 at night, I find that defects of character sneak back in. But rather than beat myself up and shame myself when I have made some mistakes, I try to learn from them and to improve. I don't view it as hard work. I look at it like going back to school or taking some kind of a course. I want to improve and I want to improve myself. But if I don't look at what it is I need to improve upon, how will I know if I'm doing better or not? Most of us want to improve in some or in many areas of our life. Sometimes that's just about more knowledge, like learning to swim, learning to dance, learning a new computer skill, learning something new, like things, doesn't require identifying any kind of a defect of character or anything that's missing in your life. It's just stuff that you want to do. But when it comes to admitting a fault, a defect of character, a shortcoming, that's a really different story for everyone, not just addicts and alcoholics. These are deep-seated psychological reasons for this. One is called cognitive bias. The cognitive bias is a mistake in reasoning, evaluating or remembering, often occurring as a result of holding on to one's preference and beliefs, regardless of contrary information. Sounds like a line out of How It Works. Some of us hold on to our old ideas, but the result was nil until we let go absolutely. There's definitely a lot of contrary information up to this point in our program. Powerlessness, unmanageability, try again and again to do it on our own, blaming almost everyone else in our lives, as we find out in step 4. The list of contrary information goes on and on and on. A second psychological reason is something called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance occurs when our behaviors are inconsistent with our core beliefs and our values. So regardless of our addictions, we still, at the core of us, have values, and we value certain things. It may be somewhat different for different people, but the things that we value and believe in usually include honesty, integrity, family, trustworthiness, self-respect, loyalty, happiness, friendships, and authenticity. But in our addiction, we don't behave like that. We don't behave like we value those things. These create cognitive dissonances. So to admit in our step 6 that we lie, we push family and friends away, aren't trustworthy, don't live our lives with authenticity, don't respect ourselves, and are generally miserable, not happy, goes against what we value. Our actions are not consistent with our beliefs and our values. That is another one of the reasons we don't like and forget this step, because we don't want to recognize all of that. It just magnifies the double life that we were living in our addiction. By the time we get to step 4, and particularly column 4 in our inventories, where we admit where we were selfish, dishonest, fearful, inconsiderate, our outlook on things is starting to change. We're starting to see things differently. If we are available to work through our cognitive dissonance, we will see that we all have more character defects than just those 4 of selfish, fearful, dishonest, and being inconsiderate. There are sometimes character defects present which we haven't drilled down deep enough to recognize as defects. And some examples of those are these: negative self-talk, sitting on the pity pot, putting ourselves down with the tapes in our head that we listen to all the time and we buy into, being judgmental. Now we all know that this is a character defect, but do we recognize the number of ways and how often we do it? Look back on your last week and ask yourself how many times you said or thought something bad of another person. What about thinking you're better than someone else? Or being an impulsive spender? Anybody here opinionated? Do you worry? And do you see that as a character defect? Because if you are worrying, maybe, just maybe, you haven't worked hard enough on step 3 and got that under your belt. Are you a perfectionist? What about a pessimist? These are just a few examples of defects of character which we may not dig deep enough to see as defects. We develop character defects when we're active in our addiction because of the disease. This disease has to survive at all costs, so we lie to protect it, we rage to protect it, we hurt those around us to protect it, though through our words and through our actions. Also, some of us have character defects which are based on faulty upbringings. If we grew up in a family that was racist, judgmental, negative, angry, has a dim view of the world, we might see that as normal, but it isn't healthy. These can be hard to get rid of because they are so deeply ingrained in our core beliefs. We sometimes develop character defects because of the beliefs or the behaviors of people we hang around with that we get drawn into, and this happens a lot. Do you have people in your life that consistently complain, can never find good in anything, talk about others behind their backs, lack of ambition, maybe they're lazy or just downright miserable? I suggest you get rid of them because you will become like them. We learned at a men's retreat a number of years ago when a speaker came around there that we are the average of the 5 people we hang around with the most. That deserves some thought. So the average of the 5 people you hang around the most, you will become. Think about the 5 people you spend most time with. Are they negative? Don't work the program? Don't share your values? Can be mean to others? Do you feel better after spending time with them, or do you feel worse? Do you feel like they enrich your life? If not, get rid of them. You are a reflection of the people you hang out with. As we develop character defects because of what we have become, because of the faulty social norms, by that I mean that society in general is starting to see certain character defects as being acceptable. My point is that we have to be vigilant, discerning, and intelligent about how we spend our time and what we allow to influence us. Let's take a look at society, media, social norms impact our values and contribute to defects of character. We as addicts and alcoholics need connection and community. That's why 12-step meetings work. But how many times are we with other people at meetings, and they're texting, they're surfing, they're checking emails and Facebook, and they miss the opportunity to give and receive something we all desperately need, and that's human contact. Is our fascination with, or dare I say, addiction to screen time a defect of character? Do you watch TV reruns or surf the net while your boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, children, whoever are in the room and miss the opportunity to connect with them? Is that a defect of character? Does the media contribute to the erosion of our values and increase in character defects? We watch shows like Big Brother and Survivor that teach us that running people down, gossiping, stabbing people in the back, and winning at all costs is a good thing. And I don't think it is. We read the tabloids. Even if we're standing in the supermarket line, we look at the gossip columns. We watch Entertainment Tonight because we have been conditioned to accept that gossiping about anybody and everybody is okay. We have world leaders calling people names, having affairs, stealing and lying, and we start to normalize that behavior rather than looking at it, evaluating it, and identifying it as a character defect. It's creeping into your head and into your behaviors. Of course it is. We are constantly bombarded with it all the time. Here's a stat that will blow your mind. The AC Nelson Company some time ago did a study, and they found that the average person watches 4 hours of television per day. That might be light, it may not be, I'm not sure. That's 28 hours per week, or the equivalent of 2 full months of nonstop watching per year. Which means by the time, now many of you aren't anywhere near this yet, by the time you reach the age of 65, you will have watched 9 years of continuous television. With all the negative news, the horrible programming, how can it not impact us and making it even harder to work on our own self-improvement? Now, aside from the character defects you might pick up on watching too much TV, I think watching 9 years of it is a pretty big character defect on its own. We often hear people in recovery say, we are the lucky ones because we are forced through circumstances to confront the reality and admit that we do from time to time make mistakes. We find a new way of living that allows us to be okay with being imperfect. It's such a relief. In AA, often we say that we have 2 big books, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and, of course, the Bible. One of the things that I like the most about the Bible is that it is full, absolutely full of imperfect people. And it's a story of how God took imperfect people and used them for good things. Mistakes were made, lots of them, and that keeps us related. Our scripture tonight is about the king of mistakes, the king of character defects, a real king, King David of Israel. Like many of us, David came from humble beginnings. He was a shepherd boy who gained some fame and notoriety by slaying the giant Goliath. As a young man, he wasn't ready to have God change his defects of character because he wasn't willing to admit that he had any. This sounds a lot like many of us in our early years and in our addiction. Nothing wrong with me, it's everybody else who has to change. Scripture is Psalm 26, verses 9 to 11, and it was written by King David. And it says this, don't let me suffer the fate of sinners. Don't condemn me along with murderers. Their hands are dirty with evil schemes, and they constantly take bribes. But I am not like that. I live with integrity, so redeem me and show me mercy. King David didn't see himself like the others, the sinners. He thought he was different. He thought maybe he was just a little bit better, a cut above the rest. Might have been a bit of a defective character going on at that point in his life. But just like all of us, he stumbled and he fell short of the mark, very short of the mark. One evening from his window, he might have been at a meeting maybe when this happened, but from his window, David saw a beautiful woman named Bathsheba bathing, and he lusted after her and had her brought to his room, knowing she was married, and he slept with her. One might say that there was a few defects of character happening there from a king who didn't see himself as a sinner, and it gets worse. When he found out that he had gotten her pregnant, he called her husband Uriah, who had just come back from a military campaign, and tried to manipulate him into sleeping with his wife Bathsheba to cover up for what David had done. Uriah chose to sleep at the palace entrance with the other servants. David summoned him again the next night and asked him why he hadn't gone home. The short answer Uriah gave was that he didn't think it was showing a lot of integrity to have the luxury of his home and the comfort of his wife while the other members of the army were camping in tents and out in the open. So David suggested that he eat and he drink while David got him drunk, thinking he would go and sleep with his wife. But he slept with the servants again. David's plan to cover up the fact that Bathsheba was carrying his child had failed. He had devised a more diabolical plan after that. So now he is covering up the character defect with another character defect. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab, who was the army's commander. And in it, he wrote, "Put Uriah out in the front where the fighting is the fiercest. Then withdraw from him so he will be struck down and die." And that is what happened. Remember, he had written, "Don't condemn me along with murderers. Their hands are dirty with evil schemes, and they constantly take bribes. But I am not like that. I live with integrity. So redeem me and show me mercy." I think David may have been struggling a little bit with honesty, with ego, humility, and being judgmental, just to name a few of his defects of character. I'm not trying to be judgmental myself. It is interesting that there is a syndrome called the Sheba syndrome, which is about the moral corruption of leaders, political leaders, church leaders, business leaders, and sports teams. It happens for two reasons: the impact of gaining power over others and the tendency for groups to look away, to look the other way when these things happen. I don't think that King David would have guessed that his defects of character would have spawned a field of psychological research, but it did. It wasn't until later that King David's life, when he confronted with sins of his adultery, among other things, that he was able to say, and he wrote in a later psalm, Psalm 51, this: "For I was born a sinner, yes, from the moment my mother conceived me. You do not deserve a sacrifice, or I would offer one. You do not want a burnt offering, or I would offer one. The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit. You will not reject a broken and a repentant heart, O God." A transformation has taken place, an acknowledgement of defects of character and the mistakes made. This change in King David from when he wrote Psalm 26 to when he wrote Psalm 51 was miraculous. It came as a result of taking his inventory and admitting his defects of character, the same that we need to do. God isn't looking at how good we are or how good we think we are. That's what David was trying to convince God in Psalm 26. What God is looking for in us is to admit our mournful woundedness. That is what David was saying in Psalm 51, and God will forgive us and comfort us. It's all right there for the taking, in the big book and in the Bible. But we have to do the work. Remember, just like items that you purchase from IKEA, there is some assembly and some work required. Thank you for being here this evening. I just want to say before we do our closing prayers, you've seen some people scurrying around, some young girls in dresses and some other people. We are doing a wedding right after the service, about 7:30 in the chapel. And it's my honor to officiate at that wedding tonight with Pastor Luke's permission, and I'm really looking forward to it. And I think if any of you wish to attend, you're welcome to, but let's the guests get in first, and those of you that want to come in after, Crystal said that you were more than welcome to do that. So join with me in our closing prayers, please. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So God bless. It's been our pleasure to serve you tonight. Keep coming back. Bring some friends with you when you come back next week. God bless and have a good week.